Good afternoon. New York State Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law, Section 212, which established the New York State Franchise Oversight Board, provides that the board shall consist of 5 members. The presence of 3 members would establish a quorum, allowing the board to undertake action. This 49th meeting of the Franchise Oversight Board is now called to order. Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Franco?
Present.
Mr. Higgins?
Present.
Mr. Smith?
Present.
Mr. Town?
Present.
Mr. Williams?
Present. Mr. Secretary, please have the record reflect that a quorum of members is present, thus enabling the transaction of business. I'd first like to recognize the participation of some of our colleagues from the New York Racing Association who have joined us for this call. It's a little hazy for me to see, so if I misstate who's in the room, please correct me. But we have David O'Rourke, who's the Chief Executive Officer and President, Joy Gardner, who is the Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary. I believe I see Glenn Kozak, the Executive Vice President for Operations and Capital Projects, and Renee Postal, the Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. I believe Robert Surace was supposed to be on as well.
Present.
There you go, I can see it in the back, it's hard to see there. He's the Director of Capital Projects. Is there anyone from NYRA I missed?
No, you have everyone, Rob. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Minutes of the board's last meeting have been provided to the members in advance. Do members have any edits, corrections, or amendments?
No. Not here. No.
Hearing none, the minutes as circulated are adopted. Ordinarily, at this point of the agenda, we would discuss the most recent quarterly financial results, but given the forthcoming discussion of the full calendar year 2024 in the context of NYRA's 2025 operating budget, unless anyone has some specific questions or issues to raise, I suggest that we dispense of any quarterly discussion. So moving on to the budget reviews, our review authority is specific. Racing Law, Section 212.8A, Romanet 3A, requires the Franchise Oversight Board to review and make recommendations concerning the annual operating budgets of such franchised corporation. Additionally, Racing Law, Section 212.8A, Romanet 3G, requires Franchise Oversight Board to receive, review, approve or disapprove capital expense plans submitted annually by the franchised corporation. Starting with the 2025 proposed operating budget, would NYRA like to start a general overview?
Sure. Thank you. All right, if you switch or turn to page 2, that's our executive summary. Just some of the highlights. In 2024, the New York Racing Association was fully engaged in the redevelopment of Belmont Park. With the demolition of the main building and continuation of work on the tracks, Belmont was completely closed to live racing, and NYRA decided to run the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival at Saratoga. The Belmont Stakes Racing Festival was a huge success at Saratoga, with handle and ticket sales exceeding expectations. With full fields of horses and maximum attendance, record handle was achieved. Additionally, the Belmont Spring Meet at Aqueduct met handle expectations, and the Saratoga Meet stayed strong. In 2025, there are a few racing schedule changes compared to 2024, as NYRA continues to strategically modify operations to improve its financial performance. The Belmont Stakes Racing Festival will be extended 1 additional day to include racing on the Wednesday before the Belmont Stakes. And the July 4th weekend, which is the closing weekend of the Belmont Spring Meet, will be shifted to Saratoga to begin the summer festivities.
So you'll be going from the July 4th weekend and then straight into the Saratoga season?
With a week break.
Yep, excellent.
All right. So page 3 is the NYRA consolidated.
If I can pick up on just a couple of little things here. You mentioned the HISA costs in one of your paragraphs there, and obviously the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority, the litigation was something that we've heard about, we've read about, and I appreciate Joy brought me up to speed prior to the filing, et cetera, and I very much appreciate that. But from a practical standpoint, could you tell us a little bit about what that litigation was and what resolution that you reached in that?
Sure. It stems primarily from the calculation being used to assess fees through racetracks. We believe the federal legislation is quite clear that it's basically a formula of their budget divided by the number of starts. HISA, in their own purview, created a formula that really weighted purses as part of the equation, which materially impacts the higher end jurisdictions and tracks, which we would be one of. So we've argued that point. What you see on these numbers are accruing to their number in terms of the amounts of cash that we've paid in acknowledgement of fees. We've held our stance. In September, HISA served us with notice that they would terminate our ability to simulcast across state lines unless we paid in full. We challenged that. We settled in the sense that, as much as I could say, is that it's basically, we settled without agreeing, and we believe we'll have a conclusion on this from the courts, because Churchill Downs is continuing to this point with the same argument. We believe we'll have a conclusion within the next 3 to 6 months. And if not, we retain all rights.
And that litigation is in the federal courts in Kentucky, right?
I believe, yes, it is, Rob.
Okay. Thanks. The other question I had is in the bottom paragraph on page 2, and I know we're going to get into some other detail on some of the little issues, but you talk about the risks being the impact of New York legislation. Are you talking about legislation that you're not aware of, or are you talking about legislation that has been proposed or is being considered?
That is just if anything were to come up to change it. It's not anything current at this point.
Thanks. That's what I read, but I was just making certain. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Renee.
Oh, no problem. All right. Page 3 has the NYRA consolidated 2025 budget, P&L, which we'll go through in each individual section. But the highlights are we're projecting operating income from racing operations of 2.8. That's compared to 2.4 million in 2024 forecast. Adjusted operating income of 7.4 compared to 7.9, and net income of 56.3 compared to 52.2. And we'll go into the individual components. On page 4, we have the NYRA handle and other relevant statistics. Call your attention down to the summary at the bottom. We are projecting race dates of 192, that's with 8 cancellations baked in. 189 were in the forecast for 2024. I will note that this forecast is as of end of October 2024 in order to prepare the documents. So, and then prior year was 196. Total consolidated handle is budgeted to be 2.579 billion compared to 2.573 in forecast for 2024.
I know you're going to get into it in the handle analysis on page 5, but it kind of jumps out right there. Can you give us a little bit of detail relative to the imports white label? Because obviously the incremental that you have there is a very large number.
Yeah, hold on, let me just switch to my.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead.
That would be our partners such as Caesars and MGM, who NYRA Bets provides licensing and platform for. We've identified it as a potential growth market, and it seems to be playing out that way.
Okay.
So the next few pages detail each meet. We have the summary on page 4. Did you have any specific questions on the individual meets? I could read through them, or?
Not on the meets, but this kind of gives me an ability to ask a question that we had teed up for Mr. O'Rourke about a year ago. But my recollection is that day you ran into some health issues as you were going to be speaking about the subject of computer-assisted wagering before the Jockey Club. Yeah, Joy's smiling because she was equally affected as well. as when COVID was running around for people. We never had that discussion as to computer-assisted wagering, but obviously it's back in the news as something that's significant. Depending upon where you sit, some people see it as smart leeches that have the ability to harness computer algorithms from preventing hardworking people that are making $2 bets from having a legitimate chance of return. Others see it as basically the only way that there's growth in handle and a growth in continuity for horse racing support. I know that you have some really significant ideas relative to that and the control and some of the discussion, or at least the way that people approach computer-aided wagering. And I was wondering if you could just kind of give us a 10,000-foot view as to NYRA's position on CAW and why the world isn't ending.
Yes, that's very good. Well, CAW, I mean, it's part of the ecosystem, and you described it quite well. It's hard to restrain technological advance or productivity advance in terms of people using computers to do math, for lack of a better term. However, you can moderate how much of that is participating in pools, primarily through pricing. And we've been quite focused on that, and some of these numbers will illustrate the fact that CAW as a percentage of our total pools is actually declining year over year. However, it is part of the ecosystem. And when you really look at the tools that have been offered to, let's just call it the general retail player, if you look at a betting pad today, it might be on a mobile phone, but it doesn't look that much different than it looked 30 years ago, does it? So the real question that we've challenged ourselves and then we've been working on internally are what are products that we can bring to democratize some of these tools to the retail player. And that's, there's a lot of testing in here because you're going to come up with a lot of ideas. Some of them are going to look good at first and then look crazy once you try and implement. But we have, within the next 3 to 6 months, we'll be beta testing, or alpha testing now. And it's really giving the general consumer a different view of how to bet on horse racing, giving them some of the powers of these algorithms. I mean, AI is exploding, and this is one area where really when you have a CAW player, they're using large data sets and machine learning. It's an iteration of AI in some sense. How do we bring those tools to the player? Now, this will be a test and try type of experiment because you're taking something that, has been interfaced in a specific way. You would never abandon that. But what other tools can we add, just to a novice player to give them some perspective of what they're walking into in terms of watching the race and having a betting interest if they'd like. And then 2, a more experienced player, something that they can leverage to improve their performance in handicapping. So it's really about accessibility to this compute for the general public. And that's something that we're endeavoring because we believe it's good for the ecosystem. It's required for some balance here, but there's potentially an economic opportunity to offer a product that could be desirable.
Do you see any ultimate limitations that are appropriate on putting on the amount of handle that's flowing through the CAWs?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of if you're looking at like as a rule of thumb, like if you could say 20% of a pool, it starts to, what it really ends up doing is it makes the pricing in the pool more efficient. It makes it look more like actually a booked bet in a sense, because the CAW players aren't playing it. They're not really winning from the other customers. They're diluting the volatility of the payouts. And by diluting that volatility, you're taking inefficiency out of the market, and that's kind of what the handicapper hunts for. So you definitely want to balance that. We're probably one of the more aggressive ones doing that, where we don't have these players playing into the win pool or some of our larger exotics like the pick 5. And as we can transition more of that play to retail, I think it's a healthier environment, and that's something that we're looking at. But it's something that you want to do in moderation with your product, because it is a large part of the wagering right now. So you need to basically methodically approach this, not you have to be very careful. In other words, you're kind of working on a plane as it's flying in terms of management of the pools.
Some of the news articles that have been written about CAWs go in extensively that there's a unfairness because of the rebate angle of those who are betting such a high margin. So their effective rate on taxation is adjusted compared to someone else. Do you see that as a legitimate question or legitimate concern that's raised?
I can when it's stated that way, but then if you look at some of these players, these are very large organizations that you could almost view them as an ADW entity into themselves in terms of their scale. And by doing that, if you terms of what they're being priced at or charged for access to the content, they're paying the highest amounts. Now, the fact that they're at such large scale and they can act as essentially a distributor of scale, like an ADW, they're able to get efficiencies in that, so they're not paying that middle overhead that the ADW would be keeping as a profit. So I understand the argument, but because of their scale, I think they're priced appropriately. We push that pricing envelope continuously, and it does impact the amount of handle you'll see through that channel. And it's just, what is the correct balance? And by pricing, you try and find that inflection point where they're not abandoning the business at the moment. And that's what we endeavor to do. So we've been moving up pricing essentially is what's been going on, Rob, and that affects the amount of volume going through it.
Okay. I'm sorry for delving down in that rabbit hole there, but it seems opportune to talk about it. So anything on the meats that you think is appropriate for us to focus on, or does anybody have any questions about the distinctions between the meats?
I mean, the only thing I would point out on this would be the fact that, and I think these numbers are quite good. They're on the higher end of what we projected 3 years ago. And the biggest constraint on us right now is access to turf courses, because we're a very turf-centric circuit. And by not having access to the two largest turf courses in North America, or I shouldn't say that, Woodbine is
Two of them.
Yeah, two of. It constrains our ability to run on the turf. Sometimes the weather, depending on the point of the year, the weather's worked out for us and it hasn't. I mean, the fall was quite dry, so the numbers were great.
Yeah.
Saratoga, God bless it, it's always hit or miss on when it's going to rain. So we're very weather dependent. We believe I would state that the racing group and Andrew and his team have done an excellent job of getting the right amount of opportunities on the turf with a limited amount of inventory of it.
Okay, Renee, if you want to pick up again.
Sure. Turning to page 7, this gives an in-depth look at the net revenue from racing operations. Just to call some attention to the big items between forecast to budget. On-track racing revenue is budgeted to increase 3.6 million or 2.1% compared to 2024 forecast. That's driven by an extra race day for the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival and the July 4th weekend at Saratoga, primarily, as well as higher Naira Bets handle on the national platform. Export revenue also is budgeted to increase 1.2 million or 1% compared to 2024 forecast. This is driven by assumed increases in host fee rates and 3 additional race days.
I know that last year, right at the beginning of the Saratoga meet, you had a disagreement with Churchill Downs that caused them to go dark for a single day. So I was wondering if you could shed just a little bit of light relative to that and whether we should have any concerns that such a large purveyor like Churchill Downs or Twin Spires might run into a similar issue this year.
Sure. So last summer, we tested the market with not just Churchill, but also FanDuel, which is these are two of the largest distributors of our content. Primarily, we were focused on the amount of purse money that we're generating, or revenue that we're generating off of wagers from New York residents from out-of-state ADWs. Now, this is a very nuanced, and I go on this for an hour if we want, but in essence, the market has been shifting towards that distribution channel. And in New York, there's a very specific tax called a source market fee that is assessed on that distribution channel. When you have a business like NYS, you stand back and you look at your content and all the different distribution avenues you may have. On track, Naira bets, those are two high margin ones for us, and we focus on growing those as much as we can. The OTB is a little bit more of a legacy brick and mortar channel, and there's other tracks in the state. The one growing channel, out of state ADWs, there's a specific acronym that I'm not remembering at the moment, but basically out of state sports books and ADWs that operate and take horse racing pay a specific tax, and there's a margin that will come back to the track and the purse account off of that. Unfortunately, that by far is the lowest margin, just because of the structure of that source market fee. So what we were doing was attempting to acquire additional revenue as a source on top of that. This is our home market. It's our most important market. There's a level of success in that or not. Unfortunately, it comes up during times when your content has a significant amount of leverage, which would be Saratoga. The last thing we ever want to do is affect the experience of Saratoga for the customers. So, with our fiduciary responsibility, we're trying to gather this money, but at the same time, we're trying to balance it. And that's why this kind of quickly comes and goes. And we ended up with an amicable resolution, and I do not see that coming up again in the near future.
Okay, thank you. Renee?
Okay, so we, out of that, we have the statutory and other items. Roughly, that's increased about 2.6. Primary drivers, the import host fees, budgeted to increase 1.4 million or 4.7% compared to 2024 due to the growth of the Naira Bets national platform, so to pay more for that. Other revenue is scheduled to increase about 1.5 million or 1.6 million or 4.5% compared to 2024 forecast, and that's primarily due to increase in sponsorship revenues related to the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival, the beginning of Naira Bets business in New Jersey, and the full year of United Tote equity revenue, which began in Q2 2024. Some of the other things that run through, the main drivers of other revenues are, especially the increase was, again, sponsorships, targeting a 5% increase in on-track agreements using a Belmont State Racing Festival and Saratoga assets. And the Naira Bets operations in New Jersey is expected to start in Q1 2025. On-track racing related revenue is scheduled to increase 2.9 million or 10.4%. And that is mainly driven by the Belmont Stakes at Saratoga Racing Festival and the July 4th weekend at Saratoga, and one canceled race day in 2024 at Saratoga that reduced 2024 revenues. Main things that go through on-track racing related revenue are ticketing and hospitality, and that's less any related cost of sales expenses. All right, moving on to operating.
Yeah, a quick question on that. Your temporary help and outside services are moving up in year over year. I'm assuming that's probably got something to do with Saratoga and the switch to Saratoga, or am I wrong?
Yes, no, that definitely is. That's driving a major increase.
I know also in there, there's, obviously the first bullet regards collective bargaining agreements, et cetera. I've had a couple of conversations with Joy over a period of time, just getting a good understanding of the ebbs and flows of negotiation, and I'm not looking for any inside information relative to that, but can you give us a good overview as to the number of collective bargaining agreements that you have and what the status generally is on those?
Yes, 26 in total, Rob. 4 in active negotiations. One, we're waiting for initial proposal. 2 of the groups that are in active negotiations are quite small. I think there's 1 person in each, actually. So it's going quite well. It's, you know, it's consistent. With 26, it's just a constant kind of turnover flow. So there's some staggering to them, but nothing standing out there. I could forward this over. It's a pretty concise schedule of what's going on.
Okay, no, that might be helpful. From a practical standpoint, you haven't had any inquiries from the unions relative to Aqueduct ultimately closing down and moving to Belmont?
No, not particularly. No, I mean, it's soon enough. Yeah, that hasn't been a topic.
I mean, the statute's pretty clear on what you have to do anyway, but I'm just wondering if there's any agita about the changes. And you said there's none yet, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, unfortunately, like a lot of, yeah, that hasn't been, you know, I think there's more opportunity here than anything else in terms of, you know, we pointed out the temporary staffing up in Saratoga, but with the Belmont asset, we're going to have a completely different opportunity down here to, you know, have a business that, you know, is 12 months a year and much more event focused.
Okay. Renee, if you want to continue, thanks.
On page 9, budgeted operating expenses.
Chris, Mr. Hagan?
Oh, wait, I have a question on 10, sorry.
Nope, never mind.
We're not there yet.
Okay. All right, so hopefully I'll get there. All right, labor expenses. So again, you know, labor is our big expense, 105.6 million is what is projected compared to 2024 forecast of 102. Again, primarily driven by increases in collective bargaining mandates, merit and benefit increases, labor required for 3 additional race days, timing of filling open positions, though, and lower expected capital labor. That's for the labor. Just some of the other, I won't go into every single item, but some of the main drivers. Outside services budgeted to increase about 800,000 or 7.2%.
What is the Belmont Sales Center?
So that, oh, do you guys want?
Yeah, go ahead. Someone's got to build it.
We're building a mock-up of what the new suites will be at Belmont as a marketing tool, and to be able to have something up at Saratoga for the sales team to be able to basically show what a suite will be and what the new will that we've never had at Belmont before.
Okay.
We did something similar with 1863 when that was being built as well, and it was very useful for sales.
Since Renee may not jump into every detail, Chris, you want to?
Yeah, I had a question on page 10 on the insurance. You guys are projecting almost a 10% decrease. And I was wondering if you could sort of elaborate on that, just given the fact that insurance is sort of shooting through the roof for everybody else. How you guys are managing to extract some savings here.
It's mainly driven by 2 items. One is we switched to a self-funded workers' comp rather than first dollar. That was roughly a year over year for a full year savings. It spans 2 years. It was almost a $2 million savings in premium. And that's, you know, basically because we've had good experience ratios. We have a broker, Aon, who suggested that we move to that model. And we reviewed all the actuarial analysis and decided to do that. And so far, we've had 9 months under the new program and are doing well.
And you reserve for it.
Yes, that's inclusive of an additional, reserve, just in case we were to have a catastrophic loss. So also, part of the decrease is year over year is property. We do not have, it's $1 million savings for the full year. So $500,000 was achieved in 2024 and the other $500,000 is achieved in 2025 because we don't have to insure the building. With regular operating insurance, it's builder's risk. So that's $500,000 of the 2025 savings. And we're really trying to look at everything, trying to optimize some of our programs to reduce our insurance costs. We meet with the brokers, we meet with the different carriers and really try to educate them on the NYRA business and what we're doing to offset risks.
On page 10 as well, if I could just pull out, we talked about a little bit at a previous meeting, the New York Racing Foundation, Inc., which is your charitable endeavor. I was wondering if you've made any donations yet, and just can you give us a quick overview on the governance relative to that organization?
Sure. So the NYRA Foundation roughly made almost 600,000 in donations this year to backstretch and aftercare related institutions. The governance is it's reviewed by our NYRA board at this point, where we discuss what we're going to, the events we're going to have, and we only had one major event, which was held up in Saratoga for during the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival, and raised almost $1 million. So we're and then we do have a code out there for other people to donate. We advertised it during the Saratoga meet, and working with some of our partners to continue donations, and then we will review with the board and take suggestions for the donations on where to.
I know NYRA has contributed quite a bit to different backstretch activities, backstretch organizations, et cetera, over years. Is this supplemental or incremental to what you've traditionally done, or is this a formalization of the way that you're going to be processing things and make it a little bit more structured for the purposes of tax?
The latter, Rob, but we believe that by formalizing and kind of centralizing it, we're able to use some of our other assets to drive additional donations to it, specifically from outside of NYRA. Okay. For instance, the gala event in Saratoga. So it's going to allow us to get some leverage, really, in terms of focus on charitable initiatives. So I think it will increase the throughput in terms of donations.
I'm jumping into a little bit of something that we're going to pick up later, but if the proposal for the Cornell-funded study on fetlock injury goes through, is the $2 million that NYRA has suggested that they would accommodate for the capital expense, is that going to flow through there, or is it flowing through something different?
That's a really good question, Rob, but we haven't contemplated that yet.
Okay. Sorry about that. Mr. Higgins?
Sort of, just because you brought it up, that Belmont Gala, David, that you're referring to, I was looking at some of the contracts associated with that, which I know we'll get to later. Can you just sort of explain what the purpose of that is? Is that 100% charitable, or is that, sort of an event that just goes along with the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival?
It's charitable. It does go along with the festival because of, it's a nice gala and it's well done. I think it'll become more efficient as we roll forward and get more experience with hosting things such as that. But it's charitable. The idea is to bring in, there's a specific demographic of clientele at these events that are quite charitable in nature, and we're giving them now a conduit to give. It also gives us an opportunity to showcase things like the new Belmont and stuff like that. So can it become a little bit of a platform? Yes, but it's absolutely fundamentally charitable in nature.
And money to fund that, is that coming out of the charity? It seems like it's coming out of your operating budget. Does the foundation kick in for that too, or is that 100% the expenses borne by NYRA?
It was part of the donations. So you have donations for the event. You have the costs, reviewed with our accountants, and that we actually had a pretty good ratio of. I think there were one of our accounting partners was telling me that the usual I haven't verified these numbers, but he said the usual for an event, the throughput out of that was 30%. So your cost would be 70%, and your, how much you have left to donate would be 30. We were almost at a 55 to 60% donation, where we had we were able to make roughly 500,000 in donations. Costs were, as low as we could keep them, given the caliber of the event.
Yeah, but so our donation to the foundation was exactly last year.
For Naira?
Yeah.
100,000.
And the result was how much to charity through that?
Well, all the donations were roughly 900,000, and we gave 500,000 to charity.
Okay.
So it's a very, and this was primarily from that event.
Yeah, so you're getting leverage off of our donation to increase the donations
Correct.
to the charities.
Yes.
That's the
And
concept.
our partners.
And will it improve? Yeah, that's the idea, to use our other channels for the foundation to increase that operating leverage.
How much is the donation this year? Do you know off the top of your head? What you budgeted for it?
100, same, for us, yes.
Renee, if you want to move on.
Sure. Any other questions on operating expenses? Oh, I would like to talk through other operating expenses. I know that's a large bucket. It's 17 million. We could look at breaking some of these out, but some of the primary amount in that is, hold on one second. Sorry, I got the wrong slide here, other expenses here. The primary amounts that drive that are bank and credit card processing fees, 4 million. We have Saratoga per diem of 4 million. Again, that increased roughly 300,000. That's driven by the fact that we'll be up there for the July 4th weekend, as well as the extra day for the Belmont Stakes Racing Festivals. Some of the other items that are in there are licensing and permits, dues and subscriptions, charitable contributions, and then some other customer relations, T&E. And the increase, like I said, is driven primarily by the Saratoga per diem, additional bank and credit card fees with higher ticketing expectations, and trying to move a little bit more to a cashless system. And licenses and permits and dues and subscriptions driven by additional software licenses and projects for IT. All right, moving on. We have interest income, roughly $9 million, and our HISA fees. At the time budgeted for, based on the invoice that we had received of 4.6 million. Now that we are moving to a different calculation model, it'll be roughly 3 million. So there'll be some savings that we learned about after the budget was created, which will potentially offset some of the capital costs for the donation. If we go into 2025, budgeted non-operating expenses. We have retiree benefits, pension expense, just to highlight some of the big fluxes between 2024 and 2025. Pension expense is budgeted as an expense of 700 million compared to a benefit of 3.5 million in 2024, an increase of 4.1 million. The change was primarily driven by recognition of assumption changes in 2024 that were recognized immediately as required under GASB. And all that's calculated via actuaries. So we just booked to the actuarial report. And the other main driver on this is the other non-operating expenses. Again, per review with our accounting firm, the demolition costs for Belmont redevelopment had to be recorded as a non-operating. It's not part of the capitalizable expenses per GAAP. So that is booked in the non-operating other expenses.
Could I ask you just to go back to page 11 for a second? His expenditures that you're talking about, and I heard a discussion previously on the litigation, and hopefully that's been resolved or whatever. But talk about the multiple states that are excluded or have opted out what is the impact on those states? How does that work?
I believe if they opt out in a neutral world, they wouldn't be able to send their simulcast signal across state lines. I believe there's a stay on that at the moment, so they are capable of doing that. There's a lot of this hinging on a Supreme Court decision that I believe is upcoming this year. I mean, the main stick that HISA has is that they can prevent you from simulcasting across state lines. That's why when we were faced with that, we needed to take action to protect the company.
Are any of the states that have significant racing industries in them, tracks in them, are they opting out in some cases?
The definition of major would be some of the higher volume states, but not what you might consider the Premier League, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Thank you.
Texas would be one of the larger ones, I believe.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Thank you.
Really, we have the exhibits, but it just gives us the breakdowns. Any other questions?
Yeah, a question about the Sugar Maple Farm. I was wondering if you could talk to us about the present use of it and your future plans, as well as, obviously there's an expense that's associated with it at this point. I'm assuming that's mortgage expense, but I'm not positive. Could you just shed a little bit of light onto that?
Yeah, the expense would be operating. Sugar Maple, when we brought that on board, had 30 mares, I believe, boarded there, and no stallions. And when you look at an operation like that, the boarding operation, if you're good, you can get it to a break even. It's difficult to make money on it, but the stallion side, that's pretty much where the upside in a breeding farm would likely be. What we've done over the last few years is cleaning up barns and fencing, like typical farm maintenance stuff, and marketing the property as a premier farm in New York, because it is. Glad to say that I believe it's full this year. It's scheduled to be full, so there should be 85 mares there. A lot of them coming out of Florida recently. So that's good. In terms of, it's really a strategic asset for the industry, and preservation of a major horse farm in New York. We're working with the breeders on concepts on what could be done on the stallion side, but that's something as we would expand this business and go further, that's something we want to do in collaboration with the breeding industry. So it's a very long play, but I think it's worked out well. And aftercare as well, as Glenn just mentioned, it gives us an opportunity for that. So definitively, that I would say that there's several different paths the business could go down, but in terms of the status right now, it's a full boarding facility, which is a great thing, which means more runners in New York in a couple of years.
Okay, thank you.
That concludes my presentation. If there's other further questions.
Okay, any other questions relative to the operating budget?
Yeah, I just had, maybe if you could give us some comments about some of the assumptions around what you budgeted for the VLT revenue. I'm sort of looking at some of the numbers. It doesn't seem like you're really anticipating a significant increase there. Just wondering how you landed at these numbers.
It's just, I think that's what we have a schedule that's been, I'm trying to remember, it's the interest. Is it CTI? CPI. It's the CPI.
Oh, that's what you're getting.
It's been calculated out for the next couple of years, and we just plug it in based on the CPI.
Any other questions on the operating? Hearing none, why don't we move on to the proposed capital budget, capital plan. I'd like to bifurcate the discussion a little between 2025, 2026 capital plan and the Belmont redevelopment project. Since the Belmont redevelopment project is much more, obviously much more robust and a little bit more high profile. So I think if we can just start with the plan that you have provided to us in the 25, 26. Why don't we start with why you have 25, 26 as opposed to just 25?
So again, similar to what was done previous years, is some of these projects roll over into the following year. So for scheduling and for permitting, we've done this now we've asked to do this for the last 2 years, just to be able to do projects that we'll discuss later on, some of the dorm work, some of the work up at Saratoga, and basically working around the shoulder seasons of the race calendar or the race season. So some of it you'll see where it'll be a Q3 start, that'll be a completion in Q1 of the following year. So that's the purpose of the crossover between the 24, 25.
Jumping straight in, Glenn, can you tell us a little bit of detail on miscellaneous building upgrades at Aqueduct?
Yeah, and again, that's basically for the time period that we have to operate over there, where we are racing as our primary downstate location. Some of the, whether it's the Horseman's Lounge that was upgraded with some of the materials moved from Belmont and to make a new hospitality area, temporary hospitality area. And then basically, if anything comes up for the time period that we're remaining at Aqueduct, HVAC, some of the units or some of the older units. So just trying to get by for the next 17 months over there.
What about the miscellaneous building upgrades at Saratoga for the guest area?
For guest area up at Saratoga, what we're looking at, there's not much going on up at Saratoga other than the post bar would be something that we'd be looking at improving, adding a few restrooms to the second floor of that area. We just received the permit today for the top of the stretch restroom upgrade, so that would be something that we'd look to take on as well. And then in the facility.
Yeah, that's reflected as Project 3, right? And we're talking about Project 11?
Yes, Project 3 is the top of the stretch.
Yes. And then again, for some of the stuff, miscellaneous stuff, we'll look at some infrastructure that will be put in place for Belmont Stakes at Saratoga. So again, with the 50,000 capped attendance at Belmont Stakes last year, we certainly learned from that experience. So we're looking to bring in some temporary restroom facilities and make the fan experience a little bit better with, again, whether it's concession areas or restroom facilities throughout the property.
As a general, my own 2 cents on that, I thought it went exceedingly well for such a huge event that was occurring at Saratoga. I thought you guys did a very, very good job on that. On the barn area, obviously we've talked about year over year, all these changes that you've been making to barns at Belmont. Are we pretty much through that at this point? I know that there's, you've done a tremendous amount of reconstruction.
We have, and there will continue to be a couple more upgrades that are taking place. We're still having discussions with the USDA on the quarantine facility on how that'll play out at barn number 5 at Belmont. In addition to that, you'll see some barn upgrades for the 26 season, and that's one of the things it falls into that 25, 26, where we look to redo the barn number 8, which is currently the old receiving barn that has the transite shingles on it and is in need of repair. We look to right size that barn and set it up for future use for, if we're fortunate enough with the Breeders' Cup coming here, to be able to have the barn set up appropriately for foreign horses, which we currently don't have.
Okay. CAFO CAFO upgrades, I'm assuming this is just your annual year-to-year upgrades on that, and there's no CAFO issue that we have to be concerned about?
Correct. And when we get into some of the infrastructure, the tracks and some of the quality of life stuff, we'll discuss that. But no, there's no, that's just the general upgrades to the pumps and some of the stormwater management.
Anyone have any questions about the capital plan in 25, 26? Mr. Higgins?
Yeah, do you guys have a time frame update for the dorm project down there and the new medical clinic?
Sure, jump ahead onto the Belmont redevelopment quality of life stuff.
Oh, it's in the capital project, huh?
However, yes, we do. If you
You'll see it on the back end, please. I'm sorry?
If you'd like me to go over it now or go over it however you'd like to.
We're literally going to do it on the next item, so you might as well do it right now. I was just going to walk through a tick list of the quality of life as we talked about after we talked about the bigger Belmont picture. But why don't you take Mr. Higgins' questions right there, because it is reflected obviously in the capital plan. So.
Sure. So I'm glad to say that we were able to build dorm number 4 at Belmont, and that was in place with a CO in, I believe it was late September, early October, which was tracking ahead of schedule. In addition to that, we already have the foundation and MEPs in for dorm number 5 with a completion date in Q3 of 25. So that's again, trending very positively. The next thing that we were dealing with in the barn area for a quality of life item are the Wi-Fi and fire alarm upgrades. So happy to say that.
No, perfect. Why don't we just go through the quality of life at this point, because it's literally right down the list. So backstretch Wi-Fi coverage.
Okay, so backstretch Wi-Fi coverage. In addition to the Wi-Fi coverage, we've also added a new fiber backbone through the entire barn area to incorporate a new fire alarm system for all the barns and all the cottages in the barn area as well. So that will be completed by Q2 of 25. That is, the barns are already transitioned over. It's the Wi-Fi that we're working on right now. And then the next item would be the Northwell Clinic that you had brought up, Mr. Higgins. Again, positive news, working with OGS with the permitting on that, which have been fantastic to work with on these projects. The electrical upgrades are complete in that clinic. We're scheduling with Northwell to work around their operations. We're looking to do either a temporary facility for a couple weeks or with us transitioning to night work and weekend work. And that's scheduled to be complete Q2 of 25 as well. That's one of the things where Northwell is supplying the product and materials. NYRA is supplying the labor and the inspections on that with OGS.
Next one is the installation of the blue light system.
That will be installed, will be delivered February 24th is what the manufacturer is telling us. Again, that fiber backbone that's throughout the barn area is already completed and ready to accept those 8 locations where they'll be positioned at Belmont. It's the same system that's used at University of Vermont, Union College, Empire State College, New York Museum up in Albany. So, it's teed up, ready to go.
Excellent. The next one is flooding mitigation, and this kind of ties a little bit into what we were just talking about in the CAP 25, 26.
Exactly. So again, with all the extensive track work that's been done and new grandstand work, all the storm water that used to go to the Belmont sump located near Barn 61 now is diverted into 192 dry wells that have been installed already in the infield of the 4 racetracks. In addition to that, the work that was done for the material storage area last year also included drainage work from the training track to mitigate any of the storm water off of the training track. So we're positioned again in very good shape to have that complete by Q3. The thing that's keeping us from completing those last 8 dry wells is the location of the video board in the infield. Once we determine that exact location, I'll be able to install those last 8 dry wells, and that's only a couple weeks worth of work.
Okay, perimeter fencing improvements?
We have 2 different contractors that have just been awarded for doing the wrought iron or the aluminum ornamental fencing along Hempstead Turnpike from gate number 5 to Plainfield Ave, as well as the Omega 2, the wire anti-scale fencing that's going from Walnut up to the Emerald Lot. 2 different contractors, all the materials are on site, and we're looking to start that the first part of March. And that's about a month duration for both of the projects. So that again, anticipating a Q2 completion.
Okay. Next one was the bike storage sheds.
2 of the 3 bike storage sheds are complete. We went back to OGS with a modification for dorm number 1, which was the original 3-story dorm that was built to try and incorporate the bike storage area directly into the building. Those materials are being reviewed right now, and as soon as we get that permit, the carpenters will jump on that. And again, that's probably a 2-week build on what needs to be done there as well, and then those 3 would be complete.
Just as a question here, you said 2 of them have already been complete. What's their utilization at this point?
Minimal, but again, we have signage up for them, and it'll be a education component working with NYS on it for the use.
Okay. Next one of ours was a refurbishment of the rec hall and the track kitchen.
Yeah, and we've done some of the scope for the basement, which would be the gymnasium, which is number 8 on your list. But we do have a permit for that, and we'll look to start that just with scheduling with the manpower here when we go to Saratoga. So I wanted to try and get the foundations in this winter, so we're prepped and ready for it. So when the weather breaks here, we'll get that complete, but the actual refurbishment and renovation of the kitchen and the new laundry area and welcoming center wouldn't happen until we go up to Saratoga. Speaking with the operator of the kitchen, it seems to be the best time to work when we're at our lowest point of racing at Saratoga and the least amount of activity for the backstretch workers.
I think that hits all of the quality of life projects. So let's go back to talk about the Belmont redevelopment project itself. Practically, I think the Franchise Oversight Board probably want to hear a little bit of an overview of the development timeline, project spending at a very, very high level, and telling us a little bit about the contracts that have been executed, let, or completed at this point. And then I think we'd also want a little bit of information at a high level, again, about the minority and women-owned and service-disabled and veteran-owned business utilization, and just general workforce mobilization as well.
Sounds good. So I'll start out at the 10,000-foot level to give an overview, and then ask Rob to jump in on some of the specifics for a few of the contracts, and then also as far as what Tishman has had for the outreach for the WMBE. So I guess just to start the conversation, what a difference a year makes. This time last year, we had a 1.2 million square foot facility that was here that we're just wrapping up the abatement on, and happy to say that at this point, 98% of the demolition and crushing is complete on the building. They're going right now with the excavation for MEPs in the basement of the entire new facility. The half of the concrete has been poured for the western portion of the facility. So there's 2 simultaneous contractors that are working, one doing the site civil, another one doing the concrete that'll be doing the superstructure here. What helped us was the one contractor was very familiar with the property, doing the work, all the site civil work for the arena, and also the retail village on the state property here. So they hit the ground running and really got us a good jump start on the project. So if you're looking at the site, half the deck is already going in for the first floor. And as I said, they're working from west to east. At high level, we're looking to get the deck, the concrete and the structural steel done by this fall to Q4 to try and get this thing dried in, again, Q4 to Q1. The next big milestone for us is with the crushing complete and a bunch of the utility work that's already been in place is using that crushing to set up a tracking pad for the crawler crane that'll be positioned here. So that's going to be a substantial piece of equipment that'll be here for quite some time to be able to set all the steel for this building. So as far as the contracts that have been awarded, I believe it's right around 65% of the contracts that have been awarded for the works. As far as some of the spending and the requests that have gone into ESD for the two different pay apps that have been, one was processed, the one was sent in, to go over some of the longer lead items that we're looking for, including the chillers, the boilers, anything with vertical transportation, with the escalators and elevators, the steel for the steel superstructure that I had mentioned to be able to do the framework of the building. The other big ticket item is the curtain wall for the glass enclosure to be able to get this product here, because as you're all well aware, we are on a tight timeline for this. And again, to have the materials here so that way we can stay on track is what has been spent to this point. The other two items are the roof and the generator. Generator lead time for this size facility is trending almost a year's time out. So those were the big components that are being procured right now. And Tishman is still actively negotiating with some of the interior trades on it for the paint, the drywall, that type of interior finishes.
Yeah, from a very high level, my understanding is that you guys are still in right on timeline, and there's nothing that is of concern at this point of being able to meet those deadlines. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. Even a couple weeks of the cold weather, because of the soils that we're working on over here, the contractors have been able to continue with the work that's required here. So no, it's trending. The two contractors positioned us very well for where we're at this point. So we're on track schedule-wise for sure.
Now, can you give us a little insight onto the MWB and SVOB utilizations?
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, we're on target to achieve the MWBE and SDVOB goals. Obviously, it's an ongoing process. So, we continue to meet with community groups, small and large businesses, local leadership to ensure we're doing everything possible to communicate the opportunities created by the construction of the new Belmont Park. Specifically to date, there have been 27 community outreach events and over 1,100 total attendees at those events.
And if anyone has an interest in seeing what's available, where can they find that?
Tishman does have a website where they can enter all their business information, and someone from Tishman Procurement will contact them, and they would let them know that they're interested in the Belmont Park. They'd go through all their pre-qualifications, and if they're qualified, they'd have the ability to bid on the job.
And the Tishman, you can find that website where? If someone's listening.
Yeah, I don't have the exact address. We can send that over to you.
Yeah, if you could, maybe we can put it up on the Franchise Oversight Board website just to make it easier for people.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
And general workforce mobilization, how many people are out there, and how many unions are engaged, do you know, offhand?
So right now, we have about 20 total Tishman employees in the field office. The tradespeople that are actually out in the field is about 90 right now. Carpenters, lathers,
Operating engineers, laborers, Yeah, and I think we actually bumped up, I think we're over 100 now, I think it's like 110, and that'll probably increase next week. We're currently discussing parking requirements with our neighbors next door to use the Emerald lot for construction, employee parking up there, and we're securing 500 spots up there. So it is gonna start to really pick up now that the deck's going down on the building.
Anybody have any questions?
And I forgot, I'm sorry, electricians and plumbing contractors here as well for all of the MEPs that have been installed in the bottom slab of the building, as well as the infrastructure around the building.
Anyone have any questions relative to the project?
On budget.
On time and on budget.
Can I ask you a question? I'm sorry,
Sure,
Ron.
Jeff.
Fair question.
Are you at all concerned about tariffs impacting the ability to timely complete? Are there components that are going to be potentially subject to tariffs?
Especially if I remember, isn't like the glass coming up from overseas?
We're looking at glass from Turkey, but then there is a component that they look to additional sources on that as well. So at this point, no, the steel has been secured for this. Obviously, the concrete is local and and aluminum as well for the roof decking, and then the type of roofing with that's also based in the United States,
Yes,
correct? Yeah. And we've been trying as well, just with the infrastructure here, whether it's the aggregate, as much of this material that we can buy here in New York State, we are buying.
And that hasn't changed any of the projections on the costs, right? So you're still where you need to be, as Chris said, on budget.
Correct.
Any other questions relative to the project? I just thought of something that I forgot to raise, and I would like to at least have you, Dave, give a little bit of an overview. One of the things that's personal to us, to me, and I know one of my fellow members raised a similar question, we continue to get lobbied is not perhaps the right word, but inquiries relative to the installation of the synthetic racing surface. And depending on who you talk to, all sorts of potential impact to the surface on the New York State breeding industry. I know we've had a couple of offline conversations relative to it and what the potential impacts, real or otherwise. And I know that there's several farms up here that have quite a number of stallions that have progeny that have traversed on synthetic swell. But could you provide a little bit of insight as to onto what the potential impacts perceived and real are likely to be because of the turn to synthetics?
Yeah, so in terms of, running specifically during the winter and inclement weather, would stand behind the fact that the data is pretty empirical. It's a safer surface. It does also give us the opportunity to run when we have off weather in the prime season and we're forced to come off the turf rather than go onto dirt. You can use the synthetic track. So in terms of safety, it's sort of a no-brainer in that sense in terms of going off of historical data. This is not a small data set. This is going on 30 years since these started being installed in Europe. In terms of the economics of it, we believe that this is going to have a very good impact because one of the things you do see on synthetic tracks is typically higher field size. The New York bred horses, a lot of them tend to gravitate towards turf racing. If we look at our condition book, a $40,000 race on the turf is probably the easiest one to fill. This will give us a little more continuity for that type of horse through the winter season. Is it a differentiator and different? Yes. Does change scare some people sometimes? Of course. If you look at, if you're really talking about dirt racing and dirt farms and whatnot, Kentucky is they have a circuit where one track runs at a time, and that you'd have to say is the dirt capital racing of the world, not just America. They run on synthetic in the winter at Turfway Park, and they have been for quite a long time with an incredible safety record, actually, for what you would consider a mid to lower tier track. So we think this opens up a lot of opportunities. Some people have pushed back and voiced those concerns, and we've listened to all of them. A lot of the breeding industry has also been quite supportive, and some of the higher profile breeders in New York have actually written to such. So this is, it is a hot topic, Rob, but we believe, and we firmly believe, that this is absolutely the right direction for New York racing to go into. We are the premier turf circuit in the United States, and this adds to that as well. And now we will make our winter racing, will it be a slightly different product? Yes. Will it be a better product? Yes, we believe it will.
I wonder if Glenn could answer our question. One of the things that's come to our attention a little bit is there's a little bit of chatter about some issues that Woodbine has encountered recently in their synthetic. But my understanding is that was a maintenance issue and wasn't an overall racetrack concern. Could you shed any light on that?
Yeah, again, I would say without being up there to see it firsthand, it's difficult to say. Looking at the data for the last 12 years of Woodbine, it's been one of the safest racetracks in North America. So again, to know how that surface has performed in that type of weather, I think it certainly has proven itself. The one thing that I would say is, with the pony track and with the FOB allowing us to put in the pony track 2 years ago, we have 2 years of experience with Tapeta during these timeframes. And I think this was a very, very strong test of what we were able to see the last 3 weeks with sub-freezing temperatures, single digits at night, and not losing a day of training. When we did get the 4 inches of snow over here, we were able to grade the snow off the track, off all the dirt track and the pony track, and have training set up at 5:30 the following morning when it was 12 degrees out. So as far as how it's performed in the cold weather, it's been very good. And again, nothing is maintenance free. There are certainly different things that you have to deal with. And again, the chatter around what took place up at Woodbine, without seeing it firsthand, it's not right for me to say. But I would say that knowing what their record has been and how Woodbine has been able to maintain a synthetic track, their numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah, actually, there is a good point there about the pony track. What's been the utilization of the pony track by the ninth horseman?
It's been, we track that every day. So there's a security guard that actually monitors how many horses go on that. And I think with our level of horses that are currently stabled here at Belmont, on an off day if we do get some rain or the track is in an off condition, we'll have over 450 horses trained on synthetic, roughly 300 on the pony track, and anywhere from 50 to 75 in each of the jogging barns here. So we already have basically at least 30% of our horse population that's training on a synthetic track. In fairness, the two jogging barns don't experience the elements, so it's not a true test. And that was one of the key things for putting that pony track in, to be able for us to maintain it and see how it does react to the weather. The other thing, if I could just add, that I know it was brought up before about the synthetic, and one of the other things has been the main track here at Belmont. That I think one of the reasons for the synthetic for us is installing the main track. What we're looking to do, and Dave can certainly elaborate on this, but is to have a track that's consistent between the circuits and have something that is very similar to what we have up at Saratoga. So with the success that we've been able to have up at Saratoga on the main track, as well as the Oklahoma training track, to be able to model after those two racing surfaces or training surfaces is what we're looking to do with a limestone base and a clay pad. In order to put that in the wintertime, there's no way that I can maintain that during the wintertime and have an even and consistent racing surface. So that's one of the reasons for this transition to a synthetic track for racing during whatever the time period is in the wintertime. But, the numbers up at Oklahoma, for 2 years, we've had over 1,400 timed workouts on Oklahoma without a breakdown. So the success of what that capital investment for a training center and also on the main track, has given us, the confidence that that is for dirt racing, premier dirt racing, that is the best surface to put in.
I think it's a really important point you just said there. Mr. Higgins, I think you had a question?
Oh, I was just wondering, I don't know this off the top of my head, are there other, similarly, large racing jurisdictions?
Excuse me, I misquoted. I said 1,400. It's 14,000 timed workouts.
I was gonna ask you that.
Sorry, 14,000 timed workouts. 7,300 per year on Oklahoma, not 1,400. I can't even read my own notes, so sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna ask, are there other large racing jurisdictions similar to New York that already have a synthetic track? I don't know the answer to this. I'm wondering if anybody off the top of their heads might know, Churchill or Keeneland,
Churchill owns Turfway, so they operate through the wintertime at Turfway. You've got Gulfstream Park that also has dirt, turf, and synthetic. Woodbine, which tore out their dirt track to put in a synthetic and then added another, and has 2 turf courses. And then you've got Presque Isle as well, that has a Tapeta surface. And then on the West Coast, there was Golden Gate, but that's no longer operating.
Yeah, Presque is in northwestern Pennsylvania.
Was that Prescott?
Presque Isle. Presqueisle.
You said the Oklahoma track is synthetic?
No, Oklahoma's
that's a
the
clay-based
limestone and clay.
Oh, limestone clay, all right, I was,
Hence, putting the limestone and clay in at Belmont makes it difficult to maintain in the bad weather, in the cold weather. But the very good success, as the Scott Palmer's Saratoga report indicated, good success on Oklahoma in the last 2 years. Any other questions relative to capital? Hearing none, before us is a resolution approving NYRA's capital expense plan for calendar year 2025. I want to specifically mention that, like previous years, the resolution authorizes the board chair to accept and approve requests for amendment to both the 2025 capital expense plan and prior approved capital expense plans, but only upon notice to all members, provided that such amendments remain within the approved spending limits and are consistent with the general scope of the approved plans. Members, do you have any questions relative to the resolution? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve NYRA's proposed capital plan for 25-26?
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries.
I'll just note for the members, there's a typo in the heading, it should be 2025, that'll be changed.
At this point of each meeting, we've traditionally also undertaken various reviews of other NYRA documents. One is capital investment, but given our consideration of NYRA's capital plans and the spending associated with the Belmont redevelopment project, I think formal consideration of the capital improvements would be redundant. That said, there is an inconsistency in the way that NYRA has provided some reports on capital projects and expenditures. On occasion, we've received a report that's slugged as a monthly that provides greater insight, but is not a regular report, with the last one that we received was in September of 24. I find the format of that report to be very, very useful. And I'd like to work with NYRA on a template to ensure that that style of presentation could be used for future submissions. It provides a nice clean recitation of projects by status: proposed, approved, started, abandoned, completed, and then a full historical summary as well that I think we would find very, very useful. It's out there, it's just it doesn't seem to make it to us every month.
Understood.
At this time, I'd like to take up NYRA's sole source, single source, and emergency procurements from April to November. I've circulated a chart relative to that. I only have a couple of very, very quick questions, and it's more of a, one is more, appears to be an error. There was a Microsoft supply contract that was listed as a one-year contract, but it had multiple years included in that I think needs to be repaired. That's from back in March. And there appeared to be a duplication of one as well that I'm trying to find here. Sincera Systems in September and October, it seems that was replicated as well. So I'm wondering is that a mistake, or did you have to go out and recharacterize the bid on that?
It was a mistake. So the person who usually handles those reports did not do October's, and it was just picked up accidentally by the person who took it over. It was actually awarded in September of 27, or September 27th of 2024.
Okay, that's helpful. I'll strike the one.
Sorry about that. Yes, that was my miss. I apologize.
Anyone have any questions relative to the contract report?
I'm talking about these, procurement reports, right?
Yeah.
At the end? Yeah, I did go through them, and I was looking, there's a lot of them, right?
I sent you a spreadsheet last night
Yeah.
as well, which has over 1,000 in them.
Oh, yeah. So I guess the one question I have is, I see a lot of sole source exception contracts in here. And I guess I'd be interested in, racing is a unique sport. I understand there's not a lot of, professional commentators. You might need a specific person, for example. But for some of the other stuff where there's been a sole source, I guess I'd be curious to know if you can sort of explain to us how you land and who gets a sole source exception versus how things go out to bid. And what the threshold is. Is the threshold $50,000 to go out for you guys for a public bid?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Everything over 50,000. And for the most part, that has been a concentrated effort by NYRA to try to get everything out to bid as possible. There are some times when either timing or, other circumstances try to go through an exception memo, but we are really focused on trying. I think a lot of departments know that I really try to harp on that, as well as legal, to try to get as much out to bid through my procurement team as possible. Is there a specific one?
Mr. Higgins has volunteered to help you go through these. We've had a very similar question, Chris, for a number of years relative to this. It's an odd format where the state procurement requirement is imposed upon a private entity.
Yeah.
And I know member town has referred to this on occasion too, which sometimes there's an obligation to go out for bid on something that clearly is going to end up costing NYRA more money because of that. And I know Jim has raised concerns that just is kind of stupid. In practice,
I didn't use that word.
It may be,
yes.
it may be appropriate to relook at it at some point.
So, it is something that we've struggled with. NYRA has for quite a long time nudged me and now Mr. Smith on trying to figure out both try to be as close as we can to adhering to the law, but also recognizing some of the odd limitations because of imposing a public bidding requirement on a private entity. It's not fun to dig through. Mr. Smith's been looking at it for a little bit of time since he's been on as well. But we have the same thing. A lot of it is an explanation. That perhaps the explanation on personal services contract is not as well presented as it should be. Because obviously there's a subjectiveness to some sole sources of your lawyer, for instance. You don't go to hopefully you don't go to the lowest bidder. There's a subjectiveness that's required in that, and there's a lot of that bleeds through there, but perhaps in the narrative, it's not as easy to discern.
I have a question on SATch sales, the golf cart rental. What's the income associated with that rental fee?
Roughly, SACs for all the golf carts up at Saratoga is probably about 85 to 90,000 a year for rentals. And it got to the point, just so you know, we've looked at even purchasing some of the golf carts, and because of the quantity that we need them, we've made some strategic purchases within capital for either the veterinarians that do LASIX or certain parking attendants. But again, with the size of the campus and what we're doing over there, even the cleaning department, where we've purchased some of the vehicles where we know we use them year over year, for Fox Sports that we provide the golf carts for, our TV department. Unfortunately, that's the balance of what do you want to own and maintain for 10 months out of the year, and what do we want to be able to turn the key and make sure that it works when we need it. And we have with Saks as well, unfortunately, because of the volume of the golf carts that are required in that area during prime golfing season, it's limited on who we get to bid on this, on the responses that we get for it.
I do note that you had 2 responses to that, so at least it was somewhat competitive. Any other questions about the sole source, single source exception? I've no new or old business, if members have any. Nope, nobody has any.
I've got one.
Oh, Jim does have one. Mr.
I
Knapp?
apologize if we didn't really get into NYRA bets the way, well, I could ask this question, but is there any, has there been any looking at the active users? I mean, you've got new users coming in for 2024, 42,000 and 30,000 activations, and then you've got 109,000 unique users. Year on year, is there any shrinkage in that active user column that is masked by the new users coming in? In other words, do you track in some fashion and look to recover active users who become inactive or stop utilizing the service?
Yeah, I'm not, if I look at the numbers, but I don't want to hold it.
I tried to make it as confusing as possible.
It's a really good question, actually. So there's always an evolution. So you're going to have a certain amount of attrition each year, and then you'll have acquisition. And then certain times of the year, the acquisitions are more sticky than others. Like during the Triple Crown, the percentages are huge of numbers, but they tend not to be as sticky as somebody who you activate during Saratoga, because you're probably getting a little closer to a core fan. Now, the trend, over the course of time, you'll have attrition and then addition, and then the equation will be either growth rate or decline. Obviously, this business has been in growth rate for several years. Is that growth rate moderating? Yes, and primarily what we're seeing is the sports books are huge platforms, and some now offer racing. Hopefully more will. So in terms of the NYRA Bets platform itself, you're really looking at a little bit more of a core product for a racing fan, because it's going to offer more attuned to racing, but you're limited in the scope of products on that platform. So when you're competing against a sports book that's offering racing and all these others, that's a much different type of distribution channel. Might be less specialized towards racing, but it's a much bigger store. So with headwinds with the adoption of sports betting in New York, that is a headwind to growth rate. However, a few years ago, we pivoted our business to partner with these same folks. And we believe that the net for racing in terms of distribution and volume, by the addition of a quasi-competitor, it actually broadens the market and increases the opportunity, because primarily we are in the distribution business, but we are fundamentally a racing content producer. So it's a very good question. Yes, NYRA Bets growth rate has decelerated, but in terms of distribution through mobile, as you say, the primary method is increasing with the adoption of sports books and their adoption of horse racing.
On a personal basis, I see this meeting is recorded. Is it possible, Chairman, to acquire just that portion where I was credited with asking a good question? I want to give it to my wife for Christmas.
This will be memorialized on our website forever.
Terrific. Thank you.
Any other questions, new business or old business? That concludes today's published agenda, but before we conclude, I want to mention that today's meeting marks the first in nearly 14 years where Brad Allen from the Office of General Services did not leave his mark, as he retired from state service on Wednesday. Brad was assigned the racing portfolio when he entered the Office of Counsel to the Governor in 2011, and as he learned, as Dave Perino can attest, that portfolio comes with the baggage of serving as the Franchise Oversight Board's counsel. When he left the governor's office, he was appointed Deputy Commissioner and General Counsel at the Office of General Services. OGS, of course, is used by the Franchise Oversight Board in numerous capacities, as they have certain responsibilities over state real property assets. When he went over, he suggested that we could continue to use his experience, and to his likely chagrin, we did. Brad was a public servant that everyone aspires to be. He's thoughtful, hardworking, problem solver who was masterful at delicately correcting me when I didn't fully appreciate an issue. He served the Franchise Oversight Board and the people of the state of New York with unbelievable professionalism and dedication. I will personally miss his counsel and believe that I speak on behalf of the entire Franchise Oversight Board family when I wish him the best in his well-earned retirement. Do any members have any items they'd like to present for consideration? Hearing none, this meeting of the Franchise Oversight Board is hereby adjourned. Thank you so much for your participation, Myra.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.